Leave it open, I mean unlocked, but closed.
Yeah, it's unlocked.
Thanks, Scott. Can you check, Scott? Okay, this is a section on motivation and self-regulated learning. And so we'll be covering two topics rather quickly here today. And hopefully you can come away with ideas that you can use in your own classes related to motivating students and fostering their strategies, their self-regulated learning skills, and their metacognition. And so we will be talking about kind of skill and will. Skill being the strategies that one uses to solve problems, to regulate their learning, adjust and monitor, and of course will, the passion, the drive, the volition that you have, the motivators that impact on you in your environment. So we'll be covering quite a bit of territory here, and you'll have to hang on to your seats a little bit. But this section here is on the chapter on motivation. And my name is Kurt Bonk from Indiana University, coming to you from room 2140, a newly enhanced and ready to roll room here in the School of Education, a demonstration site for technology in education. So we will walk you through some of these ideas related to motivation and retention. And if you have any questions about this topic, feel free to write me at cjbonk@indiana.edu. That's cjbonk@indiana.edu. Now today we've got a serious motivation problem in our schools. As many of us realize, we have what some people consider to be the dropout nation. Oprah Winfrey has pointed out places like Shelbyville, Indiana, with huge dropout rates in high school. Kids are not graduating to the degree that we would like to see, although it's not much different than it was 50 years ago or 60 years ago. We just have higher expectations today, I think. And how do we get the 30%, 40%, 50%? In some cities like Detroit and Indianapolis, 70 to 80% kids that are dropping out to stay in school so that they can help both their families as well as their communities and in turn the nation become more productive citizens, in effect, contributing citizens to society, to a particular discipline or domain. Well, we've got a serious dropout problem, as this shows here in the slide. You know, we're talking about 28 to 45% dropout rates in the Indianapolis schools area. 20,000 students a year are quitting high school before earning a degree. That's a serious issue or a serious problem, actually. Imagine if 2/3 of all packages from UPS with positives to come there tomorrow for sure would get there tomorrow but never arrive tomorrow. Well, that's what we see here in school districts in Detroit and Indianapolis and many other urban communities, and as well as rural communities like Shelbyville, Indiana, where the dropout rates are high. And what can we do? Imagine if 1/4 of all new iPods couldn't play the music that's been recorded after 1999. Imagine the Gap advertises to the masses but sells clothes only to rich customers. That's in turn what we sort of have today in schools. What do students want? Well, they want learning to be relevant to them. They want things meaningful and related to their own interests. They want organizational skills, expectations that are clear. What does the teacher expect out of them? They want modeling from their peers as well as instructors and experts as to what the best performance is, what success really is. They want prompt feedback and information about their performances. They want some personal touch and caring from an instructor or multiple instructors and the environment that they're housed in, the school district. They want diverse learner needs met. They want multiple options in their environment. They want hands-on activities, auditory, visual, reflective. They want things that apply to a job setting, especially if you're dealing with adult learners or older teens who are in the workplace. As I said, they want choice, but they want challenge. They want success. So there's a lot that you can do in terms of providing clear expectations in your class, in terms of providing feedbacks, in terms of providing a sense of challenge and a doable challenge where once students meet that challenge, they get a sense of positive self-esteem. If we go back to Bandura, remember Bandura talked about building one's self-esteem So giving choice and challenge, but then fostering an environment where students can succeed ultimately after a bit of frustration is perhaps the most rewarding and motivating environment that one can create. So you'll notice even in my class, the first week can be a little bit frustrating, figure out what to do, but then later on, you get a sense of things, that you can succeed, and you start getting a sense of personal self-worth and move along within a course. That's the way things should be designed. I'm not saying we did that exactly in here. Motivation, the process whereby goal-directed behavior is instigated and sustained. So having goals that we're moving towards constantly, whether they're short-term or long-term goals, proximal or distal goals. Hopefully fostering more on intrinsic as opposed to extrinsic motivation. The innate propensity to engage one's interests and exercise one's capabilities, and in doing so to seek out optimal challenges. So really to focus on intrinsic over extrinsic. Focus on self-determination, getting one to try things out for themselves. Do you have control over your life? Are you like the Weatheralls who just go through life day after day after day, performing actions just like every day was the day before, just like your neighbors are doing, as if you are puppets and someone is controlling your every move? Carl Rogers, the famous humanist, says no, 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 no. We have freedom to choose. We have creativity. We have experiences. We have openness. We have possibilities for building a fuller life through respect, trust, genuineness, many humanistic terms that are no longer used as much, in part because of things being deleted in psychology. I hate to say this, but 20 years ago there were chapters on humanistic psychology in educational psychology graduate books. They no longer exist, in part because of the controversial nature of them in the United States anyhow. The moral majority being part of that nixing of the chapter, but now we see the same principles that and ideals that Rogers stood for in ideas related to learner-centeredness and constructivism. It's difficult to contend that learning shouldn't be learner-centered. The same idea about trust and creativity and choice and challenge and openness exists in that, in effect, that discipline or that area of being learner-centered. Rogers put us on this path long ago with his books, Freedom to Learn and then Freedom to Learn in the 1980s. Highly, highly recommend that you get his books. Buy them for $2 on Amazon, and you'll see that what Rogers is talking about back in the 60s, 70s, 80s are the same things that we see today, and we now have a chance to accomplish much of what he was hopeful that we would be doing. Maslow, before Rogers, said, hey, we've got this hierarchy of needs. If we can get our basic physiological needs met, and our security needs met, and our belonging needs met, then we might have a chance to move towards higher level needs. So if we get the basics taken care of, we can move towards the need to build self-esteem and self-actualization. And that's why it's important that people be properly nourished and feel as though someone cares about them in school. And once we have that, we have a capability of moving to the higher level needs, learning-related needs, lifelong learning-related needs, and so forth. So hopefully you can build an environment where that is the case, where we can move beyond basic needs to a place where people are self-actualizing, where there's a chance that they might push discipline ahead because they are creative individuals who are productive and moving things ahead. So we have proximal goals, close at hand goals. I will learn to distinguish between negative reinforcement and punishment. That would be a proximal goal. We have distal goals. I will be an educational psychologist or a counselor or a ethnographer or a secretary or a plumber or whatever it is when I graduate from school. Okay. Distal goals. Performance goals relate to, in effect, your competence on a particular task. So we want to have performance goals where we think we can succeed. When people seek to gain favorable judgments of their competence and avoid negative judgments, that is having a performance goal. So moving away from those things where we might not perform so well, we might not be good at basketball, but we might be good at volleyball. So we tend to avoid basketball and play volleyball. We have performance goals. Performance goals' implicit belief is that intelligence is fixed. If little confidence, if we just, believe that we're not good at something, we will give up. We won't try it out. We'll avoid the challenge. We'll enter in a cycle of learned helplessness in an area. So performance-based goals. Learning goals, on the other hand, if we put our focus on learning something, mastering something, I want to understand why the USA was the last to enter World War II. That would be a learning-related goal as opposed to a performance-related goal. People who have learning goals increase their competence to understand or master something new. Okay? The focus is on the learning variables. Now, this is difficult in an environment that we're constantly assessing people. We're constantly giving grades. We're constantly saying they have a curved exam, and you're not doing as well as somebody else. It's hard when you're constantly comparing, scoring, evaluating, assessing to assist in learning towards goals. I think we need to move towards assisting in learning over assessing one's learning. People who have learning-related goals see that learning is malleable, that we can change, that intelligence can be increased over time, that people want challenges, that people persist. If you have learning goals, you're one who's striving in the environment, that you're trying to master a task and maximize the effort so as to complete that task. Competence motivation increases when a person successfully masters a task. This encourages the person to do more. In fact, desire and curiosity to learn about potential problems before any serious mistakes happen is an important skill, right? So to have this notion of trying to become competent is important, increasing one's competence motivation. High achievement motivation from David McClelland's research. Those with high achievement motivation, some people have a high need to achieve. They want correct feedback or concrete feedback. They are often highly productive, and they get better grades and are promoted faster than others. So you see that individuals who are constantly seeking items to add to their resume, I being one of them, have a high need for achievement, high need for being productive, a high need for listing a lot of accomplishments and being recognized by others for their success and their accomplishments in turn. Achievement motivation quotes, failure establishes only this, that our determination to succeed was not strong enough. Edward Bonk says a young person to achieve must first get out of his mind any notion either of the ease or rapidity of success. Nothing ever just happens in the world. There's another quote, I can't do it, never yet accomplished anything. I will try has performed wonders. And golfer Jack Nicklaus says achievement is largely the product of steadily raising one's levels of aspirations and expectations. Constantly looking towards achievement. Affiliation motivation is wanting to be with someone else, wanting to be part of a group, wanting to, support somebody or be in a particular environment. Less concerned with how they are doing, but want to know how people feel about them. So some people have a need for achievement, other people have a need to be with others in affiliation, in effect, motivation. Approach and avoidance motivation. Bonk's definition of approach motivation is the tendency to approach tasks in which one feels a sense of competence or curiosity. If you feel you're good at something, you'll try it out. The book definition from Driscoll and others says approach motivation is the energization of behavior by or the direction of behavior towards positive stimuli, objects, events, and possibilities. Again, basically it's pushing your energy, your heart and soul, your body into a direction where you feel you're competent. Avoidance motivation, on the other hand, Bonk's definition, the tendency to avoid tasks in which people do not feel competence or do not feel they will succeed. The book definition says avoidance motivation is the energization of behavior by or the direction of behavior away from negative stimuli, objects, events, and possibilities. So the human tendency to avoid tasks, move away from. So either you're pushing your energy towards something or you're pulling it back away from something, okay? I'm not going to do this. No way. Or, yes, I feel pretty good about myself and I'll charge in there and help somebody out and do it, okay? Continuing motivation. Okay, well, what happened in the past in terms of learning determines the degree, large degree, whether we'll engage in new learning. Okay, we'll continue our motivation. Whether learners' expectations about learning and its consequences were met, what attributions learners are making about their successes and failures. So, our prior histories, our past experiences, our luggage in our brains and bodies that we carry with us to a learning environment will impact on our motivation. So what you see in your classroom isn't just reflective of you as a teacher, it's reflective of prior experiences of those students. And you have a challenge in front of you as teachers because of the negative reinforcements one has had in the past, the failures, the places, times when you were not successful as students, and to walk into someone's environment and to expect them automatically to be motivated is an incorrect assumption. Providing rewards for participation in an activity has generally been led to decreased interest in that activity. If I give out $1 million bills every time one walks into my class for showing up or for giving an answer, and they're real $1 million bills, they wouldn't hang around for too long. But even giving them a dollar bill or a piece of candy or whatever, it can lead to decreases in activity. It is unwise to reward learners for engaging in some tasks that already interest them. So avoid bonus points for times that students volunteer for something if they would have volunteered anyways. I mean, if you're going to add rewards all the time, you're going to eventually lead to decreased interest in that particular activity, according to the research. However, positive consequences is especially important on repetitive and boring tasks, such as my old life as an accountant, learning to do your spelling words, your grammar, your syntax, whatever it is, doing the chores to give some kind of monetary reward might be important. I was paid to be bored as an accountant, in effect. Basics of motivation. In the Theory into Practice database, the TIPS database website that you have access to from your syllabi, in cognitive theory, motivation serves to increase intentions and goal-seeking acts. One's well-developed area of research highly relevant to learning is one well-developed area of research highly but relevant to learning is achievement motivation. So having goals, having intentions to achieve is very important. Motivation to achieve is a function of the individual's desire for success and the expectation of success. So both you have to want to do something and expect that there will be positive things that will happen. Okay. Weiner, he was a Weiner. He talked about attributions related to failures and successes. In terms of failures, I did not study the right thing. I'm just not up to par. I'm not a good student. It's my roommate's fault. They kept me out. Those are all different attributions of success or failure. In this case, failure. Was it related to your own effort? Is it related to your intelligence? Is it related to chance or luck? What are the factors that influence your internal beliefs about your successes and failures? Those beliefs have a lot to do with whether you will try again and strive further. Did you study hard? Attributions of success. Today was my lucky day. The teacher likes me. I'm generally a good student. That was an easy test. Now, if you studied really hard, if you succeeded at something, that's important. And place the emphasis on studying really hard. Internal versus external, stable versus unstable, controllable versus uncontrollable. Those are the dimensions of successes and failures. You want things to be internal as opposed to external. Somewhat stable, perhaps, and controllable. Those are continua or bipolar opposites, if you will, the dimensions that determine our successes and failures. Internal are factors such as ability, effort, and mood. External are task difficulty, mood of the instructor, and help from other people. Okay? More often, internal factors are things we want to push students towards. Not always. Stability relates to how changeable a factor is over time. Ability tends to be stable, whereas mood and luck are unstable. Okay? And one thing that might be unstable might be your effort. Sometimes you might try hard and other times not. And that's important to point out to students as well. Controllability refers to the degree to which an individual has control over causes of successes and failures. How controllable is this learning environment? I don't study the right things is internal, unstable, and controllable. So you can control whether to study the right things. It's an internal thing, but it's unstable because, it changes what you study. I force myself to slow down and think is internal, unstable, and controllable. Okay? Again, I'm not a good student is internal, stable, and uncontrollable. If you believe you're never a good student, you never will be a good student, or whatever, that's a problem. This course is hard is external, stable, and uncontrollable. So, just the difficulty of a course contents. That was an easy task is external, unstable, and uncontrollable. So the easy task is something the teacher created. It's external to you. It's unstable because next time it might be hard. It's uncontrollable because you don't know how difficult the instructor is going to make it next time. The course being hard is going to, that's a statement that relates to external. The teacher created the course. It's constantly going to be a hard course, chemistry, biology, whatever, and it's uncontrollable. So we want things that are focused more on effort, that are focused more on things that the student can control internally. Another model related to motivation relates to the ARCS system from John Keller. Attention, relevance, confidence, satisfaction. We want to focus on what are students attending to, what is relevant to them, how confident are they in their completion of those tasks, and how satisfied are they when they're done with a particular task or event or class activity. If we look at these four things, in total, they relate to a learning environment. They relate to creating successful learning. And Keller's model has been used all over the world to get students to be more successful. So, instructional strategies for stimulating motivation per the ARCS model, trying to get motivation stimulated, trying to get students to find particular stimuli or particular activities, particular tasks rewarding, trying to get them into meaningful tasks, problem-based learning, for instance, or having choice and selection, and then once they've accomplished something, building on that confidence. Now, there are many ways to try and do this. Driscoll has a number of ideas. Here's 12 listed for you about the ARCS model, or things that we can do in our environment. Let me just point out a couple of ideas in here. It's trying stuff out that's new, trying stuff out that's different every semester, so you're not doing the same old thing or the same thing that other teachers are doing. Creates novel experiences. Changing your instruction around a bit, varying things, doing things a little differently so that students don't get bored to tears. And I realize these 8 lectures I'm doing online are in a similar fashion, in a similar room without an audience, and that's just the way it is. But there's other resources that are made available in this class. The web resources, the book, the online discussions, and so forth, and we'll vary things in the task. Give problems that foster curiosity, that foster maybe a bit of challenge or tension, and trying to get students' personal goals on the table so that they can, in effect, take more control over learning. Give opportunities to use their skills and provide praise and rewards and so forth. So build on students' prior knowledge. Create an environment where students have some choice, some control, some personalization, goals that are set up, accomplishments that can happen. Trying to create an environment that's challenging yet rewarding, that sets the standards fairly high, the expectations fairly high, but yet makes them doable. Okay? So opportunities for success, opportunities for positive things to happen. And I have a model related to motivation and retention online called Tech Variety, and I'm currently working on a book now, but you see Skinner's ideas in there. Number 2, feedback, encouragement. Number 1, Maslow's ideas, creating a safe environment, Maslow and Rogers and so forth, tone or climate. We did social icebreakers the first week to create a tone or a climate. We give feedback in the online discussions to create, responsiveness and a supportive structure. So encouragement, curiosity, fun, fantasy, and control. We have a number of activities in here that are different than other classes in this area. Variety, there's a variety of tasks. Autonomy and choice, you have choice in what you're going to do. Meaningfulness, relevance, you can do tasks that relate to your job application papers, personal learning theories, and so forth. Interactive and collaborative and team-based, we have our discussion groups that's interactive. Engagement, effort, involvement, tension, challenge. You have many challenges in this class. And products, ultimately, that we build, maybe you create a wiki book. Goals, personal goals. These are 10 motivational principles, and I'm writing a book with 10 activities related to each one, or a 100-idea book called Tech Variety. Part 2 I want to move into now relates to self-regulated learning. Now, if you could take out a pen and paper, we're going to have a test today. Okay? Could you just take out a pen and paper and maybe open your books up for a couple of minutes and then see whether or not you know the material, because this test is going to be hard. Okay? I don't create easy tests. People avoid my classes for a reason. Okay, let me just pause this for a second and give you a chance to study for this test. Okay, that's enough time to study. Let's move on to that test. We're going to look at chapters 3, 4, and 9. That test question is, what's one thing that links those chapters together? I realize chapter 4 is not coming up for a while. What is the one thing that links 3, 4, and 9 together? Well, chapter 3 is about rehearsal and coding, dual coding, short-term memory. Chapter 4 is about schema theory, prior knowledge, advanced organizers, simulation theory. And chapter 9 is about self-regulation and expectations and attributions. In a way, they're all related to cognitive theory. In a way, they're all related, pushing us ahead to cognitive constructivist theory. If I was to give you a test and really give you 5 or 10 minutes to study, I could ask you, how did you study for that exam? And there have been people who have looked at this behavior. I think Weiner and Scardamiglia up in Toronto at OISE did a study of this once, where they gave students 5 minutes to study for an exam, and then they looked at their strategies that the students used. And some students started with page 1, sentence 1, and tried reading because they hadn't read. Other people looked at the back of the book. Still others looked at the questions in the book or the text signals. Not sex signals, text signals. Text signal is bolding of text, highlighting, underlining, questions that are inserted into the books, and so forth. So we've got different approaches or different strategies for learning that you see when you hand out a simple assignment like, we're going to study for 5 minutes for the next exam, and just watch your students' behaviors, because it's pretty amazing what they'll try. And then have them talk about it. Being aware of the strategies that you choose, meta-awareness, is a critical factor in determining later success. If you open students up to other people's strategies, they'll start seeing that what they're doing is not the most effective, and maybe they'll in fact change a bit of their approach. So what strategies did they choose? Did you reread your lecture notes? Did you reread your chapter? Did you look for summaries? Did you talk to a friend? Maybe someone next to you? Did you ask questions? Those are all things that one can do. One could ask a family member for help when he's studying for an exam. One can look for personal examples to make terms more relevant. One can ignore as much as possible and fail the exam and just give up. One can try and make concept maps or associations between information that's to be learned. There are many approaches, and many of them relate to thinking about your thinking or reviewing your thinking. Metacognition is a term that relates to thinking about your thinking, being meta-aware of your own successes and failures, your own strategies. And that's what this section is about. It's about knowing yourself, being able to verbalize your thoughts, So metacognition actually has two parts. It's thinking about your thinking, and it's calling to bear on the problem a strategy when you know you need it. It's being able to invoke or produce a plan, a strategic plan, or even a tactic to solve that problem. So it's thinking about thinking and acting on that. Okay, it's a combination of the two things. It's both planning, monitoring, evaluating, checking, reviewing, and summarizing. Tactic, on the other hand, is different than a strategy because a tactic is a specific procedure, rule, principle that you can invoke in a situation when needed. We have strategies, learning and cognitive strategies, elaborating on text, rehearsing the text, making images, visual images, organizing it, reorganizing it, rewriting it, focusing our attention, giving ourselves personal praise and affect, saying, I will do well on this test. And then monitoring our comprehension, just reflecting on whether we know things well enough. You know, we can elaborate through mnemonics, and I'll talk a bit more about mnemonics in another lesson here. But we can create visual mnemonic aids or text-related ones that can help us memorize, learn, or extend that information. You know, elaboration is one of the most important things we can do as a learner. Organization is another. Self-questioning, note-taking. Rehearsal, basic behavioral principle, just practice, practice, practice. Repeating things does help. It's not the most effective method, but it does help. You know, we can organize things, group things, map things out, create bizarre images, use the method of LASSI, which I'll talk about in another section here. Self-question, reread, paraphrase. These are all ways in which to enhance one's learning experience. We have particular cognitive strategies that we can try out to organize the material, to extend that material, to self-question ourselves, that whether we know things well enough or not. We can also use affect, self-praise, positive comments, and we can improve our own personal goal-setting behaviors, reminding us what that task is right at the beginning of a semester or course, and laying out a plan, a master plan for solving that. I think visualization of where you're going, master plans, are some of the most important things to determine success of an individual. So these are some of the things I just mentioned: elaborating, rehearsing, imaging, comprehension monitoring, affect, and focusing. Just a little summary there. Tony Buzan is one known in the UK for concept mapping, and in your list of videos, there's a video from Tony you might want to watch. I've got it in your list, and you might watch it for this week. Concept mapping, mind mapping are ways in which to put your ideas down on paper, externalizing your thoughts and ideas and getting them on paper so you can review them, you can share them, you can change them around, and you can monitor how well you're learning that information, right? So very important stuff. Individual tactics, writing notes, highlighting, concept mapping, looking for those text signals, not sex signals, text signals, the bolding, the italicized, things that the publisher and author have made available for you. Take advantage of them. Maybe create your own. Maybe create your own self-questions, or look at the author's questions, or review with a peer, paraphrase and summarize. If you do all these things, you'll find success. What to look for in text signals? As I said, bolding and italicized text, but preview sentences that get you ready for a chapter, the kind of the main goals of a chapter, the ending summary of a chapter, the highlights. Driscoll does a nice job of, at the beginning of the chapter, pointing out some of the key things to look for in a chapter. The location of the questions, the color and contrast within the text. Again, individual tactics, you can have a book or paper, and you can then go back, review that paper, going back and into the passage once you've read it, and looking for particular things, repeating, rereading, scanning back through something, again, over and over. Grouping materials together, classifying it in a particular way, reconstructing, rewriting, using mnemonics. There are many things. So, again, metacognition is both thinking about thinking, cognition about your own thinking, and the ability to regulate that thinking. It's both this esoteric kind of reflection, but then it's also doing, acting. It's not just reflection, but action. So metacognition is knowledge about one's thinking, declarative knowledge, and the thinking of others, and then monitoring the course of one's own thinking or procedural knowledge. Metacognition examples: sitting in front of a class, grabbing a cup of coffee before class in order to help pay attention to class. Reserving judgment until you reflect on what has been perceived. Writing milk on your hands so that you don't forget to pick up milk on the way home from work. Consciously creating a schema using mnemonics and other things to help you understand information better. Now, there are tests of metacognition like the LASSI, the Learning and Study Skill Inventory from Claire Weinstein at the University of Texas at Austin, created more than 20 years ago. And students at Austin, as freshmen, in the past anyhow, had to take an exam, had to take the LASSI, and if they got below a certain level on the LASSI, they had to take a skills course, a study skills course. And many universities do this today. They have students take particular instruments and decide, do they need writing skills, do they need reading skills. In this case, the focus is on study skills. And the LASSI's got subscales related to information processing, selecting main ideas, test strategies, and many other areas. Skills that relate to the ability to identify the important information, construct meaning, create new ideas, do well on examinations. The LASSI subscales also relate to attitude, motivation, and anxiety. Things related to interest in school, interest in their discipline. Are they just in school to pick up a husband or a wife, or what are their learning goals and plans in effect? The degree to which they worry about their academic performance. And by the way, returning adult students usually score very well on the LASSI, except on the anxiety scale. They tend to get a bit anxious about their own abilities. There's also subscales on time management, test taking, self-testing and study aids, concentration, and so forth. So the ability to concentrate over time, check to see that what one has learned relates to what the goals of the class are, the ability to review sessions, find tutors if you need them. So they ask questions like, they have people answer questions. Is this very much like me, fairly typical, somewhat, or not typical at all? And so you would write down A, B, C, D, or E. So questions like, I worry I will flunk out of school, okay? Is that typical of you, fairly typical, somewhat typical, not typical, or not typical at all? I find it hard to stick to a study schedule. After class, I review my notes. Is that typical of you? I don't care if I finish school as long as I find a husband or a wife. I will use study aids such as italics and headings. Even when I'm well prepared for a test, I feel anxious. I procrastinate, and I think we have a couple people in their reflections in this class that said they procrastinate a lot. I come to class unprepared. I'd rather not be in school, and I only study the subjects I like. Again, there are many subscales. These are the 10 related to the LASSI. Those are just a few sample questions that relate. Paul Pintrich, who recently passed away, had a motivational study, Motivated Strategies for Learning questionnaire, MSLQ, which combined skill and will, combined motivation and strategic behaviors. And people rated themselves on scales of 1 to 7. Very true of me or not true of me. A 1 would be not true, a 7 would be very true. And they had questions like, I prefer classwork that is challenging so I can learn new things. Compared to other students in this class, I expect to do well. I'm so nervous during a test that I cannot remember the facts. It is important for me to learn what is being taught. I like what I'm learning. I'm certain that I can understand the ideas. I think I'll be able to use what I've learned in the class. That's an important one. If you don't think what you can use, if you list a 1 here and not a 7, you're going to get a lot of people tuning out. I expect to do very well in this class. Again, an important one. If you expect to do well, you're going to put more effort in. You'll be more attentive. You won't miss class. Compared with others in this class, I think I'm a good student. A few more questions. When I take a test, I think about how poorly I'm doing as opposed to how well you're doing. Even when the materials are dull and uninteresting, like accounting, I keep working until I finish. When reading, I try and connect the things I'm reading about with what I already know. Those are things from the MSLQ, which is a free instrument on the web. If you look up the Motivated Strategies for Learning Questionnaire, MSLQ, you can find that. Now, Scott Paris at Michigan, and Paul Printrich was also at Michigan at the time, but Paris created the Index of Reading Awareness, which got at students' metacognition in reading, and I used it for my dissertation, and I created the Index of Writing Awareness. I tried getting at evaluation, metacognitive components, and other things related to writing, whether students would be good writers. What is the hardest part about writing for you? I would give students 0 points if they said there's never anything difficult, 1 point using complex words and sentences, 2 points organizing the paper into a general theme. What would help you become a better writer? If more people would help you when you write, got 1 point, 0 points writing papers with shorter words or phrases, and 2 points making sure others will understand what you write. In effect, I was trying to create an instrument that got at students' reflections and metacognitions about their own selves as writers. Do they know themselves well as a writer? More questions. Planning components. If your teacher gave you a hard topic to write about, what should you do? 0 points. Write about an easier topic. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, right. 1 point. Try to tell at least some of the main or basic ideas. And 2 points. Ask yourself questions to get at what you know and do not know. Again, getting at metacognition in writing, a specific discipline-specific metacognitive ability. There's Index of Reading Awareness with specific things related to reading that are very similar to these questions. Regulation component. Why do you go back and rewrite or recopy over again? 0 points, it is good practice. 2 points because other possible readers may not understand it. And 1 point because you want to make sure the grammar and syntax and sentence order are fine. So those are, some things related to the Index of Brain Awareness. Here's conditional knowledge component. If you were told that by your neighbor that who works at the Milwaukee Sentinel might publish your article on how to improve any school's cafeteria plan, if it was good enough, what would you do? 1 point, have a friend read it over, or possibly a teacher. 0 points, like any paper, you would send out your ideas written in the order in which you thought of them. 2 points, be creative in coming up with ideas, but also be critical as to whether they really fit into the audience from the Milwaukee Sentinel. So those are some things related to the Index of Writing Awareness. This is a multiple choice questionnaire. Metacognition is difficult to measure. And so you might get at it by using the LASSI, you might get at it by using the MSLQ, you might get at it by using the Index of Writing Awareness or Reading Awareness, but keep in mind, observing in one's environment is a better tactic. Doing case studies or ethnographies are probably a better tactic at really getting at what students are doing, and maybe retrospective analyses, having students tell you what they're doing when they're writing or when they're reading, to come back and talk about their successes and failures and what helped them lead them to those respective successes and failures. A few open-ended metacognitive questionnaires get at problem solving, get at their tactics. Zimmerman and Martinez looked at self-regulated learning contexts. Assume your teacher is discussing with your class the history of the civil rights movement. You'll be tested on the topic the next day. Do you have a method that will help you learn and remember the information discussed better? What if you're having trouble understanding and remembering the information discussed in class? So this gets at strategy use. Here's a problem. Now what strategies are you going to bring to bear on that problem? When taking a test in school, do you have a particular method up for obtaining as many correct answers as possible? What if it's a difficult test? So what are you going to do? Asking kids what they do. That's the best method of getting at metacognition. How do you study? Or tell a friend, you have a friend who does not read very well or write very well. Tell me what you're going to do to help that friend out. If you've got a friend who does not read or write very well, what can you do? What will you do? You get answers to that, and you can figure out a lot about students' metacognitive abilities. Some students find it easier to arrange a place where they study. Do you have a particular place that you arrange? Do you go to Barnes & Noble or Borders bookstore, sit in their cafe, have a cup of coffee, and and work? Is that the best place for you to concentrate? Or is it at home in a peaceful environment with maybe music, light music, classical playing, or maybe no music, nobody bothering you? What is your area that you love to work? What difficulties might you have? And here's the tell a friend. You have a tough assignment? What would you tell a friend to help him or her study better for that assignment? So there are multiple choice questions, observational questions, discussion, and interview kinds of questions. You know, there are many ways in which we can think about becoming better learners. This chapter gets at that. There are better ways to help us become better teachers. There are many ways to do that. How can you become better in your graduate studies, I guess, is my last question I want to ask of you here. So this chapter gets at our reflection, gets at